or maybe we'll counterbalance with the kick this way, right? Savate, they literally, you know, when you're fencing, you get this hand back, right, and you lunge and this hand's behind you and stuff like that. Old school savate, you will see them as they kick, this hand goes back behind them in the same way, right? Just like if they were fencing, right? They treat their foot like the tip of a sword. So fencing is about stabbing with pinpoint accuracy, right? So kicking in savate, whereas like Muay Thai, which we'll talk about in a minute, is all power. They're trying to swing their leg like a baseball bat, okay, and just bludgeon you with it, okay. Savate is very fast snapping kicks. Arguably even more than Taekwondo in terms of just all snap, but very precise targets. So they're, instead of like just trying to like, you know, break ribs, a lot of times they'll kick with their toes, but they'll try to put their toes like into your kidney, right, or into a pressure point, okay, and penetrate into that point like you're stabbing, right, with your foot. In fact, again, so one of the slang terms, savate, supposedly came from the slang term that refers to the boot, and saboteurs, as they are called, still wear a specialized boot, kind of a pointed toe boot, that allows them to kick and drive that, you know, toe with precision into their targets. So the kick stress speed and accuracy, not power. There's little or no chamber. It kind of just flips straight up from the floor. Okay. Like for example, like if I wanted to kick a knee, right, in Taekwondo, we would still raise our knee and snap, right? Savate would just kind of pick up right from the floor and maybe just come right underneath the kneecap and pop up like that and snap that way. Okay. Charlemont, a guy by the name of Joseph Charlemont is considered one of the greatest saboteurs of all time. Again, he's one of the ones that was particularly added a lot of the fencing stuff we talked about. Punches done from a lunge, just like fencing, right? You would lunge this way. A lot of their punches are a long-range lunging punch. The kicks, arm goes back, like we mentioned, things like that. But he also put an emphasis on or added wrestling. Charlemont was actually his teacher. Charlemont's teacher was actually also like a strongman, like an amusement hall guy. And one of his acts was like he would fire a cannon off his back. He'd carry a cannon onto the stage and would fire a cannon off his back. So Charlemont's teacher died in an accident. One time he stumbled, lifted up, basically a cannon went off and blew off like his head from behind because it was on his back. That's how he died, in an accident on a show and stuff like that. Okay. In 1924, savate was actually a demonstration sport in the Olympics. Where did the modern Olympic movement start? France. Okay. The ancient Olympics were Greek. The modern Olympics were revitalized. It was started in France. Okay. World War II killed so many Frenchmen that it disrupted life that it really nearly died out. There was a guy by the name of Count Baruze who basically kind of revived the art, kept it alive. Because also interesting is savate has a pretty strong tradition with women in the martial arts. Because again, there weren't enough men really left in France. Okay. All right, we already talked about the characteristics a little bit in terms of the fencing influence. Okay. One other interesting thing is they have this concept called gloves. Okay. So instead of belts, they have ranks, but they're gloves. The gloves, they're colored. They have glove ranks. Okay, instead of belt ranks. Kind of interesting. Two of the higher colors are white and yellow. We typically, in Asian martial arts, white and yellow is like, you know, your first couple of belts in almost all your martial arts, right? Asian martial arts. Those are the higher colors. And then again, because it's Europe and it's kind of tied to the Olympics, then you have like your gold medal, or you have your medal, bronze, silver, gold ranks as well. Silver gloves are considered instructors, and gold gloves are considered professors. Okay. We already mentioned the boots. They have a hard pointed toe that allows the kicker to drive the toe into the opponent while also protecting their foot. Snapping kicks, also kicks that change direction without setting their foot down a lot, right? So, you know, if you see, you kind of see fencers like, you know, a couple, multiple thrusts at a time, they keep attacking 1, 2, 3, right? So it's kind of the same idea. I throw a kick and then maybe I throw another kick someplace else without necessarily setting my foot down or whatever, okay? Kicks, as far as the sport goes, it is basically kickboxing. You can kick and punch. Kicks can go to the head and to the legs as well. And you can, you know, it's basically like kickboxing. You can kick and punch both the head. And you can score on either KO or you can score on points. There were a lot of, you know, crossover matches between Savate and more just English boxers. Obviously, England and France has had a, you know, century-long rivalry, shall we say, between wars and everything else and stuff like that. And, you know, depends on who you ask, various results. A lot of times the saboteurs do not do very well, but various results there, okay? All right, so that's Savate. The next one we're going to look at is Muay Thai. Muay Thai from Thailand is the national sport of Thailand and has been for centuries. Claims to be over 2,000 years old, nowhere really to tell because historical records have been burned by the Burmese and things throughout the wars that have gone on in that area. Okay, it is practiced. It is you know, in legend or in history, like famous kings of yesteryear practiced the art to where again it is basically now the way you escape poverty for orphan children. Everybody does it. In more recent times, Western boxing techniques were added post-World War II, but it is very entrenched in Thai culture. And you see that in culture entrenched in Muay Thai in a lot of different ways. For starters, there's this loyalty or fictive kinship. You train at a camp, okay? These camps filter into different stadiums. Each stadium has rankings, so each stadium is trying to, you know, have the reputation for having the best fighters and having the best, you know, some of the better fighters. It's like you have the UFC, but you have Pride, or well, Pride's not quite it, but you have Bellator, or you have these other fighting promotions, and so they sign fighters. They're trying to have, you know, whose fighters are the best, who's the best promotion, right? You know, who's the quote major leagues, right, if you will, for the sport. So stadiums are vying, fighters in camps are fighting for prestige in their stadium, and stadiums are fighting for prestige among other stadiums, right? But a lot of times you enter into poverty into this camp, and you train there, you live there in very third world conditions, but basically you sleep, you eat, you train at the camp, and if you're lucky after your career, then you get to come back and be a coach at the camp, right? There is what they call a Y crew ceremony, okay, that is before the fight. Each camp has a different Y crew, but basically it's kind of a dance. You, you know, ask for favor from the deities for good luck in the fight. Pay homage to, again, those that have gone before you. Again, it's a fight. Part of the Y crew ceremony is a fight dance. Again, you can tell what camp they're from based on the dance they do. You swear allegiance to the camp, honor the teachers. There's other mystical purposes like, you know, sealing the ring from outside influence, etc., stuff like that. You wear a mongkong, which is a crown that is blessed by a Buddhist priest, and that's the last thing you take off. You might wear a leather bracelet that kind of has charms on it and stuff like that. Okay. Fighters don't make a lot of money, but betting is very legal in Thailand, and they can quote unquote inject the fighters, right? So they can, you know, encourage, hey, I'll give you an extra 10 grand, whatever, if you win this fight or whatever, and stuff like that. So it's a lot of betting. Music. There's a Thai band that plays music during the fight, and it kind of works both ways, right? So the Thai fighters will kind of get into a rhythm with the music, right? So that they kind of keep pace and steady themselves. But like if the fight's kind of boring, like maybe the band will pick up the pace a little. Like they'll, you know, try to maybe get things going by playing a little faster, right, and get things going a little bit more. But so again, you see the culture there and stuff like that. Okay. As I said, it's been done for centuries or whatever. Nowadays, again, usually it's certainly a lot of people, again, a way, just like boxing is in the West, a way to get out of poverty. Muay Thai fighters fight a ton of fights, right? I mean, it's hundreds of fights, and it is because it is a rough sport, as we'll talk about here in a minute, people retire very early. You know, there are still UFC fighters in their mid-30s or whatever, right? A lot of times you are retiring a lot sooner than that, but you might retire with hundreds of fights. Right? Someone who's 16, 17 years old could have 50 fights already. Okay, and again, it's pretty brutal, but and then hopefully again you have enough of a career that you can come back into the camp or stay as a coach in the camp and stuff like that. Okay. Some defining characteristics of Muay Thai. Okay. Whereas we talked about Taekwondo is about speed, Sabat is about precision, Muay Thai is, the best analogy is I am going to trap my opponent between two baseball bats. One going this way and one going that way. So as such, my stance is a lot wider. Okay? I'm not bladed and turned this way. I'm a lot wider so I can swing with both sides. Okay? My hands are a little higher to protect against those heavy kicks. Right? So I already also alluded to, I'm going to take my leg and I am going to swing it like a baseball bat. It is full momentum. And obviously, again, they're kicking fast too, but they put more of an emphasis on that baseball bat swing than necessarily just the snapping portion. Okay? The stance, you can tell that their hands usually stay high up against the brow, and not only is that because that's also because of the elbows that are allowed. Okay? One of the things that makes Muay Thai pretty unique is it also has a lot of elbows and knees in close fighting. The knee is a deep, penetrating, driving knee, and again, big elbows. So again, those are very powerful and very brutal shots. Causes a lot more of the damage in a lot of Muay Thai fights, and is a lot stronger. Now, to do those knees and elbows, you need a good clinch. Okay? So we kind of use the kind of Muay Thai-esque clinch in Aikido. Some of you guys have done that before, but it's not just a tie-up, but it's a specific way to control the head and neck so that you can move the body around and throw those elbows and throw those knees while you've got control of them. Okay? One of the other interesting or unique things about Muay Thai is because the kicks, a lot of the kicks are to the legs or to the body, but a lot of the kicks you can kick to the legs. So one of the ways they block the kicks is by leg checking. So the roundhouse comes in, they bring their shin up and block it. So instead of getting out of the way or using their hands to block, they'll bring their leg up and they'll check the kick, right? So you see that in UFC, a lot of people have adopted kind of that Muay Thai approach to kicking, right? They'll check the kick with their shin. And so basically one person is swinging as hard as they can and slamming it into the shin of the other person without any pads on, okay? So you can see how this becomes a pretty brutal art, right? So that requires a lot of conditioning to get to, I'm going to check and see, hopefully my camera is still going here. Okay, it looks like it is, I think so. Okay. You see a lot of conditioning, right, where they're basically hitting their shin over and over and over again to thicken it up and to deaden the nerves in their legs, so that as they, again, so if you slam your shin into the other person's bone or you block their kick, right? So as that kick is coming in, I meet theirs, and as you block, you should be able to give more than receive when you block. It's usually the person kicking that takes more of the damage than the person blocking, right? But again, that's still a collision. So, you know, the old school way, you see it romanticized in martial arts movies, but it's true, is they'd kick a banana tree over, right? They would literally chop down a banana tree by just kicking with their shins, right? To deaden the legs, to toughen the legs, right? Deaden on the nerves so they can take a beating. And again, you can see how long-term that might not be great for your long-term career and stuff like that, right? But there's something to be said about the effectiveness of that type of fighting, though, right? If I'm gonna throw this kick as hard as I can, and I don't care what I hit with it, and you're not gonna, that's pretty formidable, right? You know, that's effective. That's pretty effective. Western boxing techniques, again, were added later on. People will say, like, used to be, like, again, Muay Thai fighters over there they don't box the same way like Western boxers do. There's still a kind of stylistic difference between it, but still a lot of the same Western boxing stuff. Okay? One other aspect is what makes Muay Thai pretty unique in the sport is you're actually allowed to catch the leg and you are allowed to trip. You're not allowed to like judo throw and pick them up, but if I catch someone's leg, usually in almost any other type of kicking, boxing type sport, you're not allowed to grab or catch the other person's leg. You can in Muay Thai, and then you can either kick or sweep the other person's leg out and throw them down. Okay, again, that is pretty unique. Not as many people do that. Okay, light gloves are worn. Obviously, again, it's either points or it's if it goes to decision, but obviously try and knock the other person out. Okay. Supposedly, but it seems, you know, originally they, instead of gloves, before the Western boxing gloves came around, they wore wraps. Again, it's been romanticized in movies, but if it was, you know, two people that really hated each other, or it was more of a grudge match or whatever, then sometimes they would actually put the wraps, they would cover the wraps in glass, right? And then you were boxing with glass on your hands, right? And hitting the other person that way, okay? Okay, so that's Muay Thai. The last one we're going to talk about is capoeira. That's an R. Capoeira is a kicking art from Brazil, okay? And it was, as tradition has it, it was practiced by African slaves who were brought to Brazil over the past 300 years or so, it supposedly has its roots in African tribal dances, such as the Angola zebra dance, etc. At some point it was banned during the government, but now it became a national sport. It spread, and has since spread worldwide. The cool thing, the thing that is most noteworthy of capoeira, I think it's pretty cool to see how it influenced the art, it's basically, again, a slave art. So you see origins or remnants of that slave history. It was put to music to disguise the practice of the art. Okay, there's a berimbau, which is a very specific type of instrument that they play. You know, drums, whatever else. People would circle up in a roda. Okay, R's are pronounced like H's in Portuguese, right? So it looks like a roda, but it's roda, or roda. So even if you didn't have any other types of instruments, everybody would circle together and they would do clamping, and there were certain songs that you would sing that had a good rhythm to it or whatever, and they would sing these songs and clap and chant as they moved around in the circle or whatever. And then two people would enter the roda and would spar / play fight or whatever, right? This is how they practiced. So basically, to the slave masters, it just looked like they were dancing, they were having, you know, it didn't look like they were fighting or practicing a martial art that again can be used for resistance purposes or whatever. They were just dancing, they were singing, they were having a good time, right? And again, there were specific songs. We used to have capoeira camps, and people, they bring out the instruments and everything else and stuff. You see the dress, whereas instead of a traditional uniform, like in the martial arts, they would wear white pajamas. They would typically wear white pants, trousers. Men often would go without a shirt. Usually nowadays they can wear a tank top or something, but basically slave dress. They did adopt, modern capoeira has kind of adopted the whole belt rank system, but instead of belts, they wear ropes, right? Because that was what they used for belts, you know, then there or whatever else. Okay. A lot of the names and terminologies have origins, including, for example, the concept of militia. Militia is the concept of deception. So, for example, smiling when you're getting ready to attack, right? Hiding your intentions. I don't really understand this very well, but then there are kind of rules to the game and the sport or whatever, but then it's also kind of accepted that you can kind of break the rules, but maybe not too much break the rules. You know, it's like unwritten rules in baseball that everybody talks about that, you know, are they really, you know, that no one understands them, but like they make sense or whatever, the unwritten rules. So it's kind of like that you're allowed to do that a little bit. You see the weapons of capoeira are basically your traditional slave tools, either a machete or a straight razor. Because they had a machete in the fields, or then basically you're allowed a straight razor to shield. You weren't allowed swords or knives or things like that. So again, the weapons were basically what the slave would have. The straight razor, though, what makes it rather interesting, was actually they would put it in their feet. So as we'll talk about, these big circular kicks, like a big back spin kick that comes around, right? I make this big spinning kick or whatever. There's a straight razor on the end of that foot, right? Suddenly that kick is, you know, a lot more dangerous, stuff like that. Okay? There's a lot of fighting where either I'm low to the ground or I'm basing on my hands. And the premise is that as a slave, your hands are shackled. So you couldn't use your hands. So you stood on your hands and kicked with your legs. I sometimes joke, it's an oversimplification, but it's kind of like upside down taekwondo, right? but they would base on their hands. Because I couldn't use my hands, again, there's a lot of evasion, right? It's a lot of ducking and slipping and dropping down and things like that. So someone's trying to attack me, I drop down, base on my hands, and kick them. A lot of sweeps, again, a lot of kicks from on the ground, and movement on the ground because of that. It makes it a very demanding martial art, a very athletic martial art, because of kind of almost the gymnastic element to it, right? Headstands and cartwheels, but kicking as you do it, kind of flipping and backflips and stuff, but being able to change directions and stuff like that. 2 days, again, we haven't done it in quite some time, but we used to do like a 2-day capoeira camp, and I mean, no one could move. It was, and that's like people who pretty good at kicking, but being able to do all the other stuff that goes along with it is very demanding, very tough, right? To be able to do that. But it's that circle, it's that gymnastics on the ground, on your hands, flipping stuff that makes it super hard, okay? But is a pretty cool art, okay? There is like I said, there's a circle of play called the Hoda. Everybody's clapping, singing. 2 people kind of ask the maestro to join the circle. They'll acknowledge, okay, I enter in. And then as you do it, you go to basically, they go into what we call a Jinga. Jinga is a rhythmic, basic fighting stance where I'm switching feet. I'm kind of doing this, I'm moving, and then the kicks or the movements come out of that kind of rhythm of that movement. Okay, so it's kind of a moving fighting stance-like movement, but again, everybody's kind of swinging and dancing to that together, and then it kind of, it's disguised as dance or whatever, or play as they're doing it, okay? A lot of the kicks are very circular or spinning on the ground. A lot of crescent kicks, backspin kicks, etc. Again, kind of sweeping, or if I had a straight razor, swiping through and slashing with that. It's not to say they don't have other kicks, but again, a lot of big circular kicks as they do it. And again, there's takedowns, there's sweeps and throws. It's not just only the other stuff. So, I have footage, but it takes up a lot of time. Maybe the end or whatever, hopefully maybe I can pull up a little bit of imagery so you can see the Hoda, you can see kind of what the French kickboxing looks like or whatever, but you can YouTube it as well, right? You can do that at home. Only the Strong is a pretty good, it's pretty old, but it's a pretty good capoeira movie. And in the very beginning, as far as B-rate martial arts movies go, it's not bad, and it's kind of capoeira based. I'm pretty sure it's probably on Amazon Prime now or whatever for like $2, if not free, or Netflix. I haven't checked lately, but it's a pretty good movie. And again, the opening sequence is pretty good. You can see the Hoda and stuff like that. All right. Let's take 5 minutes and we're going to go next door. We're going to practice some of these. Let's go.